Certain economic indicators are pointing to now to the near future being the sweet spot, timing-wise, to buy a house. Let's talk about that. Very recently, a nationwide networking group of realtors that we belong to was fortunate enough to have a Zoom call with the Chief Economist at the National Association of Realtors, Dr. Lawerence Yun. He talked about various economic indicators that affect the housing market, which pointed to what we have been saying for a few weeks now. Now, being January 2024, through perhaps early spring could be the optimal time to buy a house. Let's look at a couple of the slides that he shared and talk about what's going on. Let's start by looking at the mortgage interest rates. You see two lines here. The blue line is for the Federal Reserve interest rate policy, and the red line is for the average 30-year mortgage. You will see that even prior to the pandemic, mortgage rates were pretty low as they were in the upper threes, where historically the average over the past 50 years has been around 7. Now, once the pandemic hit, the Fed started aiming at 0 in order to help the economy weather the pandemic. While the two numbers are not directly related, they have a strong correlation. And when the Fed started aiming for that 0%, the mortgage rates dipped below to 3. We even had a client that was well qualified get a VA mortgage in the low 2s during this time. But as they say, all good things must come to an end, and after 2 years of this policy, the Fed quickly started increasing their number as inflation started to get out of control, and I know we have all felt that. That resulted in the mortgage rates increasing up to the very high 7s, which was a 5-point increase over the span of just a couple of years. Now the Fed feels they have inflation under control, and they're talking like they will be decreasing rates multiple times in 2024, and that is why you see the mortgage rate recently decreased from the high 7s to the mid 6s of today. Dr. Yun said that we could see the very low 6s this year, and I have heard from very reputable economists say that they see it going all the way maybe into the mid 5s. So interest rates are certainly trending in a downward trajectory. Next, let's look at the total homes sold last year in 2023. Now, all of the numbers for 23 are not quite yet published as of this recording. However, everything is pointing to 4 million homes being sold nationwide in 2023. In this chart, you can see home sales going all the way back to 1981. And one thing that should be considered is that the U.S. population grows on average by about 2 million people each year. So even if the same percentage of the population sold a home, the total would increase year over year as the population does. And I say all that to point out that you have to go all the way back to the Great Recession of the late noughts to find when volume was around 4 million. And if you think about making the adjustment for that population growth, you would have to go all the way back to the early 90s. These numbers show what a lot of realtors that we have talked to and have seen ourselves have experienced in real life. Just about everybody we know has multiple clients sitting on the sideline, not wanting to do anything buying-wise, while the interest rates are so high. Now, as interest rates decrease, many expect that a lot of people will jump into the market. Now here, I do want to address one other slide that answers the question that we get a lot. When do we think that prices will come down? Well, the answer is not unless something unforeseen catastrophic happens. That can easily be seen in this slide where we look at the inventory levels. Now let's put on our economic 101 hats and think about supply and demand. If we look at the nationwide inventory from 2000 leading up to the Great Recession, inventory went from 2 million to 2.5 million. When the housing crisis hit in the late noughts, we saw the foreclosures and the inventory peaked at 4 million. When inventory was that high, the supply far outweighed the demand and prices of homes decreased. Now jump to the pandemic. When inventory hovered between 1 and 1.5 million, and a lot of people jumped into that market because of the low interest rates, therefore, the demand far outweighed the supply and prices increased. Here in Georgia, from the beginning of 2020 through the end of 2022, we saw an increase of about 50%. Now, what we saw in 2023, inventory remained at that low level, but interest rates took a lot of people out of the market, as we have said, and that growth finally cooled. Some areas of the U.S. last year actually saw declines in home prices. However, in our area, we still saw a little bit of growth. Right now, according to Dr. Yun, inventory is about half of what it would be in a healthy market. Thus, the supply is still in a very low spot. And frankly, I don't know of a credible real estate economist that sees a housing market price crash on the horizon based on the amount of inventory that is available. So getting back to the point of why the now to the very near future could be the sweet spot for buyers. We discussed how interest rates are probably going to continue to decrease in 2024. We also discussed how the volume was down in 2023 and a lot of would-be buyers were sidelined due to the higher interest rates. Now, let's say when summertime hits, which traditionally that's the time of year when the highest amount of volume is transacted, if interest rates are in the low sixes or even below that, we could see demand spike from all those buyers that didn't want to buy at the higher interest rate. It's very plausible that we get into a situation where there are multiple buyers for every house that's available, just like we saw in the pandemic. Although it probably will not be anywhere near to that extent when it was historically hyper-competitive on the buy side. But we could see where buyers are having to waive contingencies and buy for above the list price just to beat out the competition to get into a house. Right now, in our area, the average list price to sales price is about 96%, meaning that buyers are getting about a 4% discount off of the asking price. Now, if I were looking for a good time to buy a house, it would be now and in the very near future when I'm perhaps getting a mid 6% interest rate and still getting maybe 4% give or take off of the listing price. That is much more preferable to getting, let's say, an interest rate in the fives, but having to pay above the list price to beat the competition. Because remember, you can always refinance down to a lower rate when that happens in the future. If you're thinking now could be the right time for you, we would love to chat and we could dive even deeper into these numbers. We are certainly happy to do so. Please feel free to email, call, or text us. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it to be informative and thought-provoking. If you'd like to see more of these types of videos, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're here, check out this next video. Until next time, bye.